Welcome to the Self-Publishing School podcast. This is the podcast to listen to if you're an aspiring writer or an author who wants to be more successful. On this show, you'll learn how to write and launch a book successfully, all from the top authors and people just like you who are doing it at the highest level. I'm your host, Chandler Bolt, the founder of Self-Publishing School, the author of the book called Published, and the CEO of selfpublishing.com. For free training on how to publish a book that sells 10,000 copies, go to selfpublishing.com/free training. Our next speaker needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. All right. So his name's Gary V. You may have heard of him before. You may have seen him on social. He started Wine Library back in the day, turned that into a massive business, co-founded VaynerMedia, runs so many companies now that I can't even keep track. He's authored 6 New York Times best-selling books, including his book Crush It, including Jab, 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 Right Hook. And he's got a couple new books that just came out, including a children's book. So children's book authors, stay tuned. We might get to talk about that a little bit as well. But join me in welcoming to the stage, Mr. Gary V. Gary, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's dive in with this. I mean, obviously, prolific author, books have been a huge part of growing your brand, growing your business. Why books? And what are some of the biggest impacts that you've seen on the business side of things from the books that you've published?
Why books? Because people read them. You know, I think I'm shocked by how many people are overly romantic about the medium of distribution of thoughts and ideas. I don't demonize any platform, whether it's a platform within social media, like a TikTok or a Snapchat, whether it's a medium that is evolving from its prime years, like radio, and definitely not something like books, which have been here forever. And whether it's in Kindle form or audiobook form or hardcover, softcover, it's just very clear that people read books at scale forever. And so why books is because I want to get thoughts across and share ideas and be creative. And it's one of the most substantial mediums in the world. As far as business impact, I mean, I just wrote a new book called Day Trading Attention. And I would say every morning that I wake up, there's a LinkedIn message from a CMO or a head of marketing from a Fortune 5,000 company that says they just read it or listened to it. They're buying it for the whole team. Or I'll get a text from my new business team at VaynerMedia that says somebody just, RFP'd us and in the comments section said they just read Day Trading Attention and that's exactly what their company's looking for. And so, look, Crush It, my first book, besides the keynote that I gave that led to the book offer, the combination of that keynote and the book, that was the watershed moment of transitioning my career from being a wine guy to being a business and marketing personality. And, it's one of the most substantial chapters of my career.
And can you speak on that? I mean, because before then, like you said, you were known as the wine guy. What are your thoughts for people here in our audience that are trying to change industries and use a book to do that? Obviously, you did that incredibly successfully with Crush It. Like, what did you learn from that? And what advice would you have for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously you need it to be commercially successful. And so to me, Crush It's one of my most commercially successful books. So it helped transition. I think it's very obvious that a book can do that for people. You know who I think about a lot? Mitch Albom, right? I knew him on ESPN for the sports reporters, but Weekends with Morty, that completely changed my perception of him. Like, oh, wait a minute. He's like an author, not just a sports reporter, And so it's obviously a very real medium. And I think authors should also use modern mediums to set up that path. So it wasn't just Crush It. It was Crush It in combination with 24 months of Twitter and Facebook content that was not, this is the best Rioja to drink or the new Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. It was, hey, Facebook and Twitter might be a big medium. You need to check it out. Or here's how I actually built my dad's business. Or here's how I manage people. Or here's where I'm investing my money. And so, I think it's a combination of the two. And, I think a lot of people that are watching this need to be careful of over putting a book on a pedestal. Even though I love putting it on a pedestal, it's an and, not an or. It's not like I need to be an author of a book or bust. It's I'm going to use social media creative. And by the way, the depth that you can go, I mean, especially if you're someone who can use LinkedIn properly, you can write real paragraphs. Think of it as the way you would write an op-ed to the New York Times 30 years ago as a gateway to people becoming interested in your book. You can do that for free every day right now and actually reach an enormous amount of people if you're a high quality writer. And so I would encourage authors to not only recognize that a book can change the paradigm and reposition them professionally to the world, but I would also encourage them heavily, because I know so many author friends or ambitious authors who I think view social media writing as a lesser than, and it's a humongous mistake.
And what I think, it's easy to look at the social media landscape right now and take for granted, you set a lot of the trends of what we are seeing today. And I just remember, you said it's not just Crush It, I was everywhere on Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, for 24 months. So I remember in the early days, I mean, I forget what the figure was. It was like you were spending 25, 50 grand, 100 grand, whatever it was a month on content on all those platforms. So I guess two-part question, and you've done this repeatedly on new platforms and caught new trends before they've really become mainstream. So I guess, how do you look for and spot those trends? And then how do you know when to go all in? Because I think that can be scary, is like you went all in on these platforms. It's like you couldn't go anywhere.
I went all in, but to your point, it's because I saw results. Right, I wouldn't go all in if I didn't. I'll give you an example. I started a new podcast format called Podcast with Friends with 3 guests. And I did 20 episodes this year, and I don't think I'm going to continue doing it. But I went all in with my intuition that it was a good format. And the fact that it hasn't hit the audience's, cup of tea, that doesn't upset me. That doesn't make me question myself. Am I losing it? Because all these 30 years where I've been hitting things right, there's been a million things that we can talk about what I did on Facebook and Twitter, but I also went all in on Social Cam, and I went all in on Peach, and I went all in on Jelly, and I was testing and trying everything. I think what I have, which I would encourage people to analyze themselves and double down on it if they have it, or start to change if they don't. I'm not scared to waste my time. And I'm shocked by how many people are scared to waste their time when their time is not even that valuable. So there's a level of audacity that people that haven't made it yet are like, well, I don't want to waste my time on that, Gary. I can't go all in on that. I'm like, well, what are we doing here? You're talking to me about you wanting to be a New York Times bestselling author, but you're not willing to do things that you think are beneath you. I think what it really speaks to is that most people don't want to put in the work that is required to achieve remarkable things. In this genre, knowing how much people value being a New York Times bestselling author or a commercially successful author, that's a very small group of people that have ever written books. And people that have ever written books is a remarkably small number in compared to all the people that want to write a book. So don't you think it should be hard? And so I think, what have I done well? I don't say no. I say maybe. And I think most people say no. And I say maybe with the hope of yes. And I think that's an important framework that has worked for me. And so whether it's AI or whether it's something else, VR, blockchain, I just don't say no. Because history has proven to me that the people that say no always lose. And the people that say maybe eventually find their nugget or their genre or have a career that looks a little bit more like mine, which is like, listen, I'm aware that I've been gifted with intuition around consumer behavior. So I will have a higher propensity of doing well with this stuff, but I'm kissing lots of frogs to find these princes.
I love it. So let's shift gears, talk a little business.
Yep.
the business empire has grown. You've got a bunch of kind of offshoots of VaynerMedia and the Vayner brand.
Yes.
How do you juggle it all, and how do you figure out where to focus your attention?
I juggle it through good people. So I think one thing I've done very well is I built a very large organization with VaynerX. So VaynerX holds VaynerMedia and 8 other companies, the Sasha Group, even Saddam, Vayner Commerce, and Gallery Media Group, PureWow.com, and things of that nature, Vayner Speakers. And then even outside of that, Vayner Sports sits outside of VaynerX. My brother runs that. And then there's obviously VFriends that sits outside of it. And now I have Vayner Watt, which is a TV production company, sits outside of it. Vayner Watt, my partner Eric Wattenberg, runs that day to day. I'm the special sauce. Vayner Sports, my brother AJ runs that. I'm the special sauce. VaynerX, I run. VFriends, I run. But VaynerX, I run with Mark Yutkin and Alan Harker and Avery and Nick and Kaylin and Hannah. And, and VFriends, I run with John Troutman and Andy Kraniak and Miling Chow. I think I scale through people, which works for me because I'm very much a guidance counselor, a camp counselor, a head coach, a big brother. I'm very comfortable and I enjoy leading people and building really deep relationships within my business organizations. And that continuity, even Wine Library, I still run. Literally while we were listening to that nice music, I'm going to pull it up right here on my laptop. I texted my best friend Brandon something about today's wine text. By the way, if you like wine, winetext, text.com, sign up for it. I texted him something about it. And he's running the wine store day to day, somebody I've known since I was 14, but I'm still very involved, because it's my family business. It's kind of my first love. And so, I think I do it by having great people around me. And then how do I focus? Anybody who's watching this who has 3 or more children is going to know what I'm going to say. You're only as happy as your most unhappy child. Same with me running 10, 15, 20 businesses. I'm just kind of watching them, and wherever I need to help is where I'm at, whether that's extreme offense or extreme defense, right? So the way I view it is extreme offense, extreme defense. Either, oh my God, we've cracked something, let's go all in, and that's going to eat up a lot of energy, or we're in trouble, let me go all in. So think of it as a boat. There's a hole in the boat, I got to go put my finger in it. Or a boat race. I see a path where we can beat every other boat. I'm going to go jump and take the wheel and put my foot on the pedal, and that's how I run my world.
That's cool. That's really helpful. And we had Dan Martell on yesterday, and he talked about kind of graduating out of becoming the CEO of his businesses. So it sounds like, are you, of those 8 businesses, are you the CEO of any of those, or do you have people that run those?
So I would say that Dan is probably giving better advice for the masses of this audience than I am, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I would argue I'm not only the CEO, I'm even the COO in a lot of my companies. But that is not because I'm trying to maximize money. I'm trying to maximize happiness. For me, running businesses day to day is my great joy. I would rather run my businesses than go skiing or play golf or go scaling, right? So Dan's advice is for a lot of entrepreneurs who actually have businesses predominantly to make money, to then go spend it on things they enjoy more. A yacht, trips, whatever that may be, fancy cars. I think I'm in a smaller group of people where, I've got VaynerX, for context of this audience, is 2,500 people in a $330 million revenue business. So it's a big business, just that one. But I get enjoyment out of being the COO in a world where I understand what Dan's saying. Like, a lot of people are like, become the chairman of the board, Gary, go do bigger things, make more money. I'm like, yes, I understand. And that's very good advice. It's not bad advice, but they don't understand me. I enjoy the HR, the challenges of restructures. I've got a lot of COO DNA in me. I've got much more COO DNA in me than chairman of the board DNA. Right? I'm the CEO, but I go down to be COO way more than I get excited about one day being chairman. In fact, I hope I'm never the chairman only of my companies.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that the day I take my hand off the wheel is the day I die.
And so I think we're throwing around a lot of titles here, right? CEO, COO, chairman of the board, whatever. I think to Dan's point, he wants to create content and then shine a light on the businesses because that he feels like that's the highest value thing that he can do to grow the revenue of those businesses. I would assume that you probably have a similar stance to that. So I guess maybe
Yeah, I mean, I would argue I wrote the damn book on it. Right? Pun intended. I just think you can do both.
And so what are you spending most of your time on in the day-to-day for those businesses?
Well,
you said defense or offense. What does that look like?
It's both. I mean, it ebbs and flows. So right now I'm so deep in VaynerMedia and VFriends, right? VFriends just came out with a kid's book, has cartoons coming out. I've got VCon coming up next week in LA. I'm working on a lot of, people would be stunned that are watching right now if they went to eBay right now and typed in VFriends, what's going on with the collectible pins and the trading cards. And so I'm in it. And it's everything from 2026 product planning to, technology advances with the blockchain. And then on VaynerMedia, we just hired a new head of Australia, a new head of Canada. We're plotting Middle East expansion. We're pitching 7 of the 50 biggest companies in the world to become their creative agency in 2025. We're expanding into deep AI stuff, and then hiring, firing, I'm in deep restructure mode right now to make it more efficient, make it more profitable, cut overhead, but move those overhead heads into the floor. So just operating, brother.
Nice. Love it. I can relate to that. Now how do you think about hiring and developing people? You talked about hey, key part is I've got partners that can run a lot of the day-to-day, and then either I'm going all offense or all defense, and that allows you to kind of float between these 8 companies. But what's your advice for folks, especially at the level that you're at, of identifying talent, developing talent, and retaining talent? How do you look at that?
15 years ago, I started VaynerMedia. My dad never paid me a lot of money when I worked at Wine Library, which is appropriate because it was a family immigrant business. And so the way I started this was my brother graduated college and we hired as interns 4 of his best friends from high school and college. I brought one guy over from Wine Library that I thought was sharp, Matt Sittimer, still with the company. And we were 6 people in a conference room of another company. And that's how we started the company. And of the people that were in that room, 4 of the 6 are still in the company 15 years later. And everybody in the top 100 employees that I hired with the mindset of, I'm going to make this person a family member of mine in perpetuity. Hopefully that means that could be done within the company. But if not, they're obviously someone that I'll have a relationship with outside of the company forever. And that stands to be true today. And so it's the intent to develop a forever culture that I think creates these kind of people. If you view people that you're hiring as you pay them and thus they should do whatever you say, or I'm going to build a company for 3 or 4 years and I'm going to flip it, you're going to be in a harder framework to pull off really doing what I'm doing, which is playing in perpetuity and evergreen. Thus, the relationships you're making and the development of those employees is everything. My entire everything relies on me developing 50 to 100 forever teammates. And so as you can imagine, if that's the case, I'm actually off the grid this week. This is the only thing I'm doing on a Saturday. I'm in Europe right now, but I texted someone about their dad being sick this morning. It's just part of my everyday life. Like if I'm developing real relationships, I'm going out to dinner with people. I'm just acting human, not corporate. And it's not some sort of master plan. It just fits my personality, but it also is the requirement of creating 25, 40-year executives. There's only 2 reasons why somebody will stay in a company for 35 years. One is you became family. 2, they're scared and insecure and never want to leave, even though it's a crappy situation, because they themselves have their own issues. You much rather be the first one.
And so I love that intent, and I love the development and just the deep care for people. How do you balance, like, you're a hard driver, you grow companies very quickly, you work very hard. How do you balance that with the people that you're developing? Because I would assume that that's pretty hard to work with.
Not at all, actually. Not at all. Let me go the other way. I have zero expectation of the people around me working as hard as me. Zero. Because they're not being compensated at the same level. I think this is a huge mistake, and it's an audacious and delusional mistake that people around you should be working as hard as you when they are not being compensated as much as you are. I deal with it very easily. I have employees that are 9-to-5ers, my friend, really, and it doesn't bother me. I don't get to judge my employees' ambitions. I just have to do a good job articulating the truth of what comes along with their ambitions. So if you're a 9-to-5er and you're off the grid all weekend and after 5, it's unlikely you're going to be the CEO one day when I move on. But it doesn't mean you can't have a great career at my company. And so I need all types. I need the people that want to work. And by the way, I'm also very prepared when their vibe changes. I've had many employees sit in my room at 25 and tell me, Gary, one day I'm going to run this company. And then they fall in love and start a family and move out to the suburbs and want to go to every softball game. And I think that's beautiful. And then all of a sudden title and comp start to slow down for that person, and somebody might lap them, and that's okay too. Like, I don't judge how people want to live their life. I'm just responsible for being articulate, candorous, respectful, kind. And so I'll be honest with you, I've never struggled with the level of work ethic or tenacity or even capability of the people around me. If I think someone stinks and are lazy, I'm in control. I can fire them.
Cool. I love it. And I love the emphasis on having clear conversations, right? Because their circumstances might change, your circumstances might change, or what the business needs of them might change. But if you have clear conversations about that and are adaptable to that, well, then you can build longevity regardless of what the circumstances, how they might change in the business.
And as a business owner, for everybody who's watching here, by the way, are those all, in those screens you have right there, is that all the faces of the people that are tuned in?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's so cool. I wish. So for all of you that I see like very tiny in the left corner, like, just remember, if you have employees, you're in charge. You know, like, I'm stunned by how many CEOs or founders are crying about things all the time. They're like, Johnny's a mess. I'm like, fire Johnny. You can, you know, and so just a lot of excuses and a lot of lack of accountability. And like, by the way, if you're firing Johnny as your right hand and he's the 6th right hand you fired in 2 years, now it's time to not point fingers. It's time to point thumbs. Because clearly you're the problem. So there's self-awareness. There's so much that goes into building this out properly.
Yeah, I like that. Which Michael Hyatt would always tell me about stuff like that. What about your leadership has led to this result? Right? You're the common denominator.
I couldn't explain to you how much I believe the next sentence out of my mouth. I genuinely believe that every single thing in my companies that's a problem is 100% my fault. I'm aware that I didn't forget to close the door. Like, you know, like, but like, I think that level of accountability when you're at the top actually leads to a lot less anxiety and a lot more happiness. And I also think it's true. I hired the person that left the door open, or I hired the person that hired the person that left the door open. And so I think that's something that is liberating, and I think is unfortunately a little rare.
Right. Well, because there's a freedom that comes from not being able to point the finger. Because if every problem in the business is my fault, well, then I also have the ability to change it.
That part, brother. That
so
part.
it's liberating. right? And let's put some of the audience on the back screen here for a second, so you can see more of them, Gary. And then I'd love for you to speak this next advice to them, which is for folks who are trying to scale to a lot, because we've got a lot of folks that are pre-7 figures, and then some folks who are trying to go 7, 8, 9 figures. So pre-7 figures, like going back to that version of Gary and those versions of Gary here, what advice would you give them?
Pre-7 is fine. If you do not have a right-hand person right now, you're going to struggle to get to 8 figures. So we've talked a lot about this, but this is the piece of advice. 2 things stand out pre-7. One, it's hard to sometimes afford a right-hand person. I think people get confused by that, but it's not as hard if you go with family, friend, or youngster that is destined to be remarkable. A lot of people think they have to overpay for someone who's been doing it. I don't see it that way. So right-hand person for sure, pre-7. And number 2, if your ambition is to get to 8 figures and you're at pre-7, you're still at 6, you're gonna have to compromise certain things. Like you're gonna have to bleed a little bit. It just, there is a willing your way to 7 figures variable that and by the way, when you hear that, if you're like, I don't like that, Gary, then maybe you actually don't want to get to 8 figures, and that's okay. As a matter of fact, let me give you a curveball. A lot of people have businesses that do 800,000 a year that they make 250,000 from, and they like life, and then they go to 2 million where they make 700,000, but they don't like life because it just came along with a lot of extra stuff. I've seen this a lot.
Yeah.
Something to keep in mind. But I would say right-hand person, more tenacity.
Cool. I like that. And then selfish question for me personally, we're at about 15 million a year right now. Next big benchmark is 100 million. What are the things that you would think about if you were me?
Two things on that. One is patience. Believe it or not, it's just, you might be able to just stack. Like when I was at 14, which was the year at Vayner, I told AJ, I think we can get to 500 million by doing very little different, just more. Mm-hmm. And we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Comma, 15 to 100 sometimes also takes new product line innovation, like a real additional thing. I mentioned wine text earlier. I built my dad's business to 65 million. I left, it went back down to 25. Mm-hmm. I invented wine text back to 65. Mm-hmm. So it took me inventing something. So you may need to be into another genre or another product or service. Or the mistake so many people make is you don't realize that it's just another 7 years of doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I like that. And by the way, when you're seeing this stuff come up on the screen, that's the audience reacting to what you're saying.
I was enjoying it. I live on feedback, so I've been enjoying those for the last 30 minutes.
All right. So if you were me, Gary, what would you be focusing on as the CEO to break through?
What are you trying to attract from a customer lens? Let's start with that. Who?
Say that in a different way. What do you mean?
Yeah. If you're the CEO, what should you be focused on? I always think it's customers, right? Mm-hmm. So who's your target customer?
People who want to grow their business using a book.
Then I think you should be making an obnoxious amount of content. I mean, LinkedIn is just loaded. YouTube Shorts. I would become remarkable at organic social, you personally, so that you then know who to hire and how to judge them. Mm-hmm. So I don't mean that you have to be at the front of it. You can be. But I need you. Like, what's unique about me is I'm the front man, but I'm also the behind the scenes man. Mm-hmm. I had one of my guys on Team Gary go to another prominent individual, and he hit up one of my teammates a year later and goes, I didn't realize how weird Gary was in that he did both. He was in front of the screen, but he was also the guy behind the screen. I think for you, you have to definitely at least be the guy behind the screen, like know what works on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, right? Mm-hmm. Then what content you put in there, obviously everyone's fixated on the personal brand. I actually think the avatar and the mascot are coming next anyway. So like if you made the author advantage ant and made that the character, maybe that's who you explode as something that everybody follows. And you're making animations instead of podcast videos. So I would say the number one thing a CEO needs to do is she or he needs to be remarkable at getting new customers for wannabe authors to grow their business. All the attention sits on social media, all 7 platforms. You need to figure them out.
Love it. And my team's probably going nuts right now because you're like, Chandler, you got to do this.
But again, Chandler, it's key here. I'm glad to hear that's what you said because I preempted it. It doesn't actually have to be you, but you, the human, needs to know how it works. And then whoever you put in front of it, the Geico Lizard, Flo from Progressive, or yourself, like Gary V, Dan Martell, like you can make that call, but the organization needs to be putting out multiple pieces of content a day across every one of those platforms.
You said
that's why I wrote Day Trading Attention. I knew that I had the follow up for Jab, 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 Right Hook, and it's completely based on this.
Cool, love it.
And it's by far the biggest elephant in the room for every business. It's the biggest opportunity.
Cool. Well, Gary, final question here. What's your parting piece of advice? Obviously, you've published a bunch of books successfully, scaled businesses successfully. Parting piece of advice for this audience who wants to grow their business using their books.
Don't try to convince the unconvincible. Don't dwell on one publisher. If HarperCollins didn't like your book, move on. If Shimon's just do not try to convince, have conviction. There are many people when I started my career that didn't get me. I didn't try to convince them. I just went and executed and found the ones that did. There are people still who don't get me, and that's okay. Do not try to sell to the non-sellable. Find the ghostwriter, find the publisher, find the distributor, find the bookstore, find the people that do get it. Do not waste your energy being insecure that you want this person to get you. It doesn't matter.
That's awesome. Well, Gary, what's the book or place that you'd like to send people that they can check out?
I'm Gary VEE on every platform. I'm Gary Vaynerchuk on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, and I really appreciate your time, and I hope everybody has a tremendous weekend.
Yeah. Guys, big thank you and love, Gary. I know you're off the grid this week. Thank you for making the time for this.
Happy to do it.
Yes, sir. Give it up for Gary Vaynerchuk. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of the Self-Publishing School podcast. I know there's so many places that you can be spending your time. There's other podcasts that you could be listening to, YouTube channels that you could be watching. So thank you so much. It means the world. Now, I want you to do 3 things right now if you found this episode helpful. All right, number 1, I don't know if you know this, but we've got a YouTube channel. It's a companion channel to this podcast. All the video versions of the episode are on the YouTube channel. So number 1, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Number 2, if you're listening to this podcast wherever, whether this is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, number 2, I want you to subscribe to this podcast right now so you don't miss a future episode. And then number 3, this is probably the most important, leave a review on the podcast. All right, reviews are super important and help the podcast get discovered by other people. So number 3, leave a review on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. If you're on the fence about scheduling a publishing consultation call with my team, maybe you're not quite ready for that, I've got some free training that I think will be really helpful for you. All right, all you have to do is go to register to sign up. Go to selfpublishing.com/free training. When you do, you're also going to get a free digital copy of my new book published. And on that training, you're going to learn the next steps, so how to implement with your book. So how to write, how to publish, how to launch successfully. So go to register right now at selfpublishing.com/free training. I'll see you there.